folks. Right, that was a bit of a different opening to usual, wasn't it? Forgive me that. I had to get a little bit of angsty rock out of my system, but welcome to you all. Very gentle welcome after that. Welcome to another episode. If you're new here, please hit the subscribe button. If you haven't seen my stuff before, basically I sit here and chat a little bit about music and guitar for a short while. Try and keep things varied, so I want to sort of mix things up every now and again. Not just talking about guitar playing. Today I'm going to mix it up and actually do a little bit more gear talk, I guess, but also intersperse it with some general guitar chat, as I like to do. If you're a returning viewer, though, welcome back once again. You know what you're in store for today. It's a little bit grey and disgusting outside, so this video looks a little bit sort of more drab, and that kind of fits a theme. You know, I'm going for some heavier, higher gain tones today, as you'll have been able to tell from that introduction. I've taken my Les Paul, I've tuned it to E flat, which kind of carries on from the theme that I had in a couple of videos ago, talking about the virtues of strats in E flat. But I also mentioned that I love the tone of Gibson guitars or humbucker equipped guitars in that tuning as well, for exactly that sort of thing. There's nothing that beats slightly down tuned heavy rock riffing, and you know, I've actually put this in drop C sharp, you know, the equivalent of drop D but half step down, and you know, it works very, very well. That actual opening riff was from a Whitesnake tune, of all things. It's from one of my favourite rock albums ever. It was one of the first albums that really got me into that kind of hard rock style. It's from their Good to Be Bad album, which came out about, I think, maybe 12 years ago, 12, 13 years ago. And I honestly don't think I've heard many modern rock records since that have bettered it in terms of, you know, songwriting, production and riffs, and just guitar magistry. Is that even a word? Guitar majesty. Majestic guitar is what I'm saying. From Doug Aldrich and Reb Beach on that particular record. That's a great little riff, that one. Third track on the album. Let me just play it one more time. It's proper beefy. Pretty cool. I love that stuff, and in kind of, you know, deciding to do this video today on that sort of a theme, I'm also getting to use an amp that I haven't used before on this channel. I've actually had a few questions about it. I'm talking about this, the Mesa Triple Crown 50, which has always been lurking there in the backgrounds, but I've never actually sat down and used it in a video yet. And a few people asked some questions about what I tend to use it for, you know, because it's actually certainly different from everything else that you've heard me play before. You know, I'm normally into kind of single channel Brit style, quite dynamic amps. I've talked about this in previous videos that, you know, I can refer you to hear me talk more about that stuff. But the Mesa is totally different. It's 3 channels, it's got MIDI switching, it's 50 watts, it's EL34 powered, so it's very much in that kind of British wheelhouse. And the way I use it is really as, you know, it's kind of underselling it here, but I use it kind of as a utility amp, and I use it as my go-to amp for, back in the days of gigs, remember those? I used to use it for like cover gigs, function gigs, and, you know, all that kind of stuff, which is good fun. And I've got it hooked up with my live rig, which is just the little Line 6 HX effects on the floor, with an expression pedal, and, you know, you might be able to see in the background, but when I change things on the HX, it's changing the channels on the amp, it's changing little functions in and out, like the solo boost. So it's such a clean, minimal setup, and I love the way that this is kind of configured now, because it means I can go out and do any kind of gig, really. Any type of music that's played on a gig, if it's covers and stuff like that, then I know this amp's got me covered, if you'll pardon that little pun. So, you know, it can handle, of course, the big disgusting gain tones that you've just heard, which is channel 3. You've also got channel 2, which you'll have seen I just switched to, which I use in kind of a crunchy, low to mid gain JCM 800 kind of a sound, you know, kind of classic rock. Sounds good to like do the neck pickup and roll back on the volume. And then lastly, it's got this really nice clean channel, which I use it. All the presets on the HX are with a compressor, so it's quite a just a really kind of lush sounding clean, and I use that, you know, for certain songs, certain kind of tones. You know, and what that lends itself to is just having that much bandwidth of tone just coming from the amp. It means I can use a few effects as well to get sort of mid-gain crunchy stuff. As well as gross. Highly ambient stuff there as well, loads of reverb and delay that's still swimming away. Can have that on the gain sound too. Pretty cool stuff comes out of this little rig, and you know, you might think that sounds a little gimmicky maybe, but you know, on gigs that I do, it comes in so handy to have all these different sounds, and that's really the beauty of that amp. So you don't hear me playing it too often, but that's kind of what I use it for. To the people who asked about it, you know, it is a fantastic amp. It really sounds good, and it really sounds different and operates differently to everything else that I've got as well, and everything else you'll have heard from me in the past. So to the people who asked, that's what the TC does for me. And if you're looking for like a great utility amp for yourself, I mean, you know, this isn't really a proper demo of the amp today, but check out the slightly older Peach Guitars videos where I use this all the time. I used it on all the guitar listings because whatever guitar I was using, whatever kind of sound I wanted, that amp with a couple of things on the floor worked really, really nicely. And, you know, you kind of have to be a little bit open-minded sometimes with gear, because we all love the old stuff. We all love the vintage amps. And contrary to all that stuff, this amp kind of seems like a world away. You know, it's really modern, it's got all this clever MIDI switching and stuff, but sometimes that's actually going to help you out a lot, and you have to kind of swallow your pride a little bit as a vintage guitar enthusiast or whatever you might be, as a lot of us are, and just think, okay, this is going to work. And I know this is going to work, and I know that every time I turn up to a gig, my sounds are going to be the same. Nothing will have been knocked, nothing will have been changed, and I'm actually planning to take this one step further. You know, kind of the whole pandemic thing got in the way, as it has done with a lot of things, but you know, once gigging starts up again, part of the reason the Boss Waza tube amp expander came in is to be used with this, to attenuate it, and also to provide few other functions like the speaker simulation, and that's MIDI controllable as well. So you know, it's a very different side of the coin to a lot of the stuff that I usually talk about, which is just kind of purity of tone and dynamics and all that stuff, and this is a world away from that, really. You know, it's still a valve amp and it's still analog and real, but I'm using digital effects. All the tones are from the amp, which, you know, usually I get most of my gain tones from pedals, so it's just very different, and I think it's often fun to have little bits of gear. You know, I talked about that before with the rather wacky example of the Fuzz Factory pedal being something that's totally different, that challenges you a little bit. this is kind of in that lane. It's different, and it is a challenge to figure out how to use it all, but when you do, it's kind of like, you know, it's just security. It's having a great bunch of tones that are really easy to access. So anyway, that's a fair bit of rambling about the Mesa TC amp today. It is a great amp, and I appreciate a few of you have asked questions, so hopefully that answers many of them today. The Les Paul, by the way, a few of you have asked questions about this as well. This has got a very good story, this guitar, and I'm going to save this for a future episode. But, you know, I just want to point out with it, I've got this tuned to E flat, dropped down to C sharp, as I said. I've got 10 to 48 gauge strings on it, so it holds up nicely on the low strings. You know, it doesn't get too sort of spaghetti-ish. But these pickups are bare knuckle Stormy Monday pickups, which I've talked about before. They're one of the lowest output pickups that they do. And yet, you know, when you go to a high gain sound, they absolutely deliver. You don't need a high output pickup to get high gain tones. This is one of those little myths that's been debunked fairly regularly on the internet. I'm sure a lot of guitar players know this nowadays, but, you know, granted this isn't a super modern high gain contemporary tone, but I've always managed to get by just fine with a nice low output pickup. It works well for clean and it works well for high gain, so, you know, maybe you hadn't considered that before. Hopefully that might help you out if you're searching for kind of to get the right pickups in your guitar, to get the best balance of all things, to cover a huge array of tones. You don't have to go high output. You know, when I gig with this amp with my Sir Alt T usually, which has got low output Thornbucker pickups in it once again. So, you know, a few little tone tips here today. You know, granted this has been a bit more gear heavy than they usually are. I'm sure next time around we'll get back to talking about playing more often. But on the subject of that, if you haven't heard it before, I encourage you to check out the Good to Be Bad album by Whitesnake. It's one of the best hard rock albums around, I think. Certainly made in the 21st century anyway. I'll link it below in the description. So that's it for today. Thanks for joining me for another episode. I really appreciate it. Once again, if you're new here, hit that subscribe button and I'll be seeing you very soon. Right, take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.